Hello and welcome to session 2 of the Business School Leaders Forum, brought to you by GoToWebinar by LogMeIn. My name is Paul Thurston. I'm the conference producer here at AMBA and BGA. I'm happy to be joined by Peregrine Global Services and their special guest panelists who will be presenting on developing and measuring workplace soft skills, the challenge for business programs today. In a moment, I'll pass over to Paul Mallett from Peregrine Global Services, but just before, I'd like to let everyone know that this session will be interactive with polls. And after the presentation, we'll go to a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please type them into the question tab in the control panel, and hopefully we can answer all of them. They have agreed that if any unanswered questions have not been answered during the presentation, they'll follow up and get in contact with you guys. So without further ado, I'll now pass over to Paul Mallett to start the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Welcome, as Paul mentioned, to this webinar as part of AMBA's Business School Leaders Forum. We're delighted to be part of this. We had planned to be in Budapest for the face-to-face conference, but here we are together now, and I'm glad that you've been able to join us. As Paul mentioned, my name is Paul Mallett. I'm the EMEA Regional Director for Operations at Peregrine, which means that I'm involved with activities in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. I'm delighted to see a number of familiar names, the people who have registered, and a bunch of new ones. I'm glad you're with us. And as Paul mentioned, there's two Pauls here. I'm Paul Mallett, he's Paul Thurston. As Paul mentioned, we have a panel, and I'd like to just start by asking each of our panel members to go ahead and introduce themselves. So let's start with Olin.
Hey, well, hello everybody. My name is Olin Odekoven. I'm the President and CEO of Peregrine Global Services, and delighted to be with you here on this panel.
Next in line is Laurel. Laurel.
Hello, I'm Laurel Bickland. I'm Vice President of Peregrine Global, and I'm glad to be here this morning also.
Great. Next in line is Laure. Laure, I think your microphone's blocked.
Sorry.
There you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laure Bertrand. I'm a human resources professor, and I'm the head of the soft skills department at the Pôle Léonard de Vinci. The Pôle Léonard de Vinci is a French establishment of higher education, and it is made up of 3 schools: a business school, which I'm representing here today, MLV, and an engineering school and a web design school too.
Great, thanks, Laure. Next in line, but last but not least, is Christina. Christina?
Thanks, Paul. I'm Christina Perry, and I am the Project Portfolio Manager at Peregrine Global Services.
Great. Thanks, Christina. Now, obviously, many of us have been participating in webinars. Just want to give us a little bit of ways in which you can help participate in this webinar. As Paul mentioned, there'll be a number of polls that we'll be asking, and if you can just answer those when they come up, and we'll give you some of the data that comes out of those polls. We do have the opportunity to ask some questions. There's a question pane or panel in the GoToWebinar menu. If you're looking at it, you'll notice that there's a way in which you can type in a question or a comment. So please feel free to, and we'd like to have people ask some questions or make any comments during the presentation. We're going to run the presentation, and then at the end, during our question and answer period, Paul will be looking at those questions, and then we'll be asking those questions, and our panel members will help respond to those. I mean, if we have time, there is a little hand where you could raise your hand. I'm not sure we'll have time for opening the mic. We have a lot of people participating in this, and sometimes it's a little bit hard when we have a lot of people participating where you raise your hand. As you know, keeping your microphone muted. They're muted here on our side, but if we do open them up, you should just mute your microphone to avoid any background noise. So we're hoping that you will able to ask us some questions and participate by responding to the polls. So let's get started. One of the things that we're all very familiar with is the research that's being carried out and has been carried out with regards to soft skills. This is nothing new for many of us. We have been reading about this for a number of years, and it's interesting. I was able to gather some statistics that I think illustrate the importance of soft skills. And as you can see here, executives rate soft skills as equally as important as technical skills. And this is one thing that keeps coming up again and again in the surveys that are conducted, the importance of soft skills by top executives. In addition, HR managers note that without soft skills, it can really limit the productivity levels within organizations. So there's a link between productivity and the effectiveness of soft skills in the workplace. And one study that I just found was one that was done in 2018, which was with companies or factories in Bangalore, India. And they did a number of soft skills trainings within the factories. And this yield, that's not a mistake, this yield of return on investment for the in-house training of soft skills is obviously very significant. So as we can see, I mean, there are a lot of other statistics out there, but as we can see, it is very clear that within the work environment by executives, HR managers, people running organizations, the importance of soft skills has become we've become very much aware of the importance. I have another slide here which demonstrates for the Society of Human Resources the problems of missing soft skills. And these are those listed here, indicate that we're still not quite where we want to be with providing soft skills. And I'd actually like to bring Olin into the conversation here. Olin is a business owner and someone who has consulted with companies across the globe and with executives across the globe. And I'm curious for you to share with us, Olin, some of your experiences with regards to maybe soft skills that are missing in the workplace, or maybe organizations that have had some success with where they're mastered. So I'm just going to ask Olin to give us a few of his ideas on this. And I'll be going through a couple of slides while Olin's speaking, just to continue with some of the stats that I found.
Well,
Olin?
thank you, Paul. Laurel and I, when we first started Peregrine Leadership nearly 17 years ago, and over the years, we certainly hired a diverse set of folks, including people fresh out of university, as well as seasoned veterans like Paul and Christina. And with the company, we have done a lot of consulting work with small, medium-sized businesses here in the US and around the world. And certainly there's been a true trend in what we've been seeing when it comes to the importance of soft skills and some of the types of soft skills. As this report here from the Society of Human Resource Management noted, today's workplace environment certainly needs these skills as well as others. It's been our experience that seldom do employees really struggle at work due to a lack of technical skills. Typically, if there is a struggle or a challenge, it's often related to these soft skills, these workplace skills that are so critical for success. And really, from a business owner's perspective, we can often teach the technical skills required for the position in a relatively short time frame. The unique attributes, the unique knowledge that we need to have in the workplace. But teaching soft skills is much trickier. It certainly takes much more time and is much harder to do. And so the more that higher education can do to help develop these skills before we see them in our organizations, all the better. In terms of success stories, based on some of the work that we have seen and conducted with businesses, certainly, and some of the ROI that was mentioned here earlier with the study in Bangalore bears this out. Reducing workplace conflict If employees have a higher degree of emotional intelligence, for example, they're able to work in a positive conflict environment and create and innovate, as opposed to the destructive context of conflict. We've seen improved efficiencies in processes as employers have better communication skills. And we've seen better teamwork and collaboration as employees have better leadership skills. As a business owner, these things do matter because they do have a very tangible and real return on investment. So therefore, again, the more that higher education can do to develop these important skills before we as business owners see them, all the better. And then we can be more productive in producing the goods and services that we're after. Thank you.
Thanks, Olin. To align with that, I'd like to actually bring in Laurel. Laurel's someone who's had many, many years of industry experience. So I'd like if you would be willing to share with us a little bit, Laurel, about the impact in terms of industry with regards to soft skills.
Yes, thank you, Paul. One incident that comes to mind is when I was working in industry with an engineer, and he had developed several plans that we were to implement. And he, of course, had given us these plans, and they weren't well implemented. And so I would go back and ask him questions about what he had planned. And after a period of time, I realized that he was a pause talker, which means he would only talk if you weren't talking. And I'm an over talker, and so as soon as I would say something, then he would shut down, not talk, for a long period of time, actually. And so we weren't getting the information from him that we needed to implement those plans. And when I finally realized that, and I would ask him a question and then wait and wait and wait till he would give his answer and then complete giving the description of his plan. And then we started getting much more information out of him, and we're much better able to implement those plans that he had developed. But it was a very painful process and a long learning curve to be able to better work with him and implement those plans. So communication, while it was good that we understood his communication style, he never did. And so it would have been good to be able to have a little more soft skills training on both sides for us to be able to work together better.
I think you bring up a really interesting point, Laurel. And on the slide, you see within industry, leadership, management, and communications. Of course, there's a lot, but I think it was important what you just said at the end on both sides, having not only the staff, what we call our staff and line staff, but also within the management structure that, leadership also sometimes needs soft skills training, that we have these expectations sometimes that they're all good and everyone else needs the training, where in fact sometimes in an organization it's really throughout the organization that you see the need for developing these soft skills, and that holds true in education as well. It's not just our students, our faculty and staff also may be in need of those soft skills. So let's shift, as Olin was bringing up, the importance of what we're doing in business schools and how, the types of things that we need to do. I have a poll here that I'm going to ask Paul to put up on the screen. And this is a poll, our first poll, which is a very simple question, which is, do you teach, and I put /develop because I think they go hand in hand. Do you teach, develop students' workplace soft skills as part of your academic program? So in your academic program, are you teaching and developing students' workplace soft skills as part of your academic program? So Paul, if you could just open up that poll so that people might be able to answer yes or no. I gave a dichotomous question here, so I didn't give you an out by saying maybe. So if you could take a minute to.
So the poll has been launched, so we'll give it a few moments for everyone to answer. Okay, so we'll close it now. So we have had 94% say yes and 6% said no.
So that's a good thing. It just shows that when we're listening to business people, what the statistics showed us, that we are, as business schools, addressing this. And if I asked this same poll 10 years ago, I probably would not have that same response. I probably would not have a person like Laura in this presentation because we didn't recognize, or we weren't responding quickly enough to what the needs of business were. Or maybe 15 years ago, I think within the last 10 years we've been doing. So maybe 15 to 20 years ago. Now I have a second poll that relates to this. It's a little bit more specific. So the question is, do you have a standalone, formal, specifically designed workplace soft skills modules for teaching and develop soft skills? So I'm not talking about integrating them, I'm talking about standalone, a soft skills course or class. I don't mean course, but a class or module that is designed to develop teaching and developing, soft skills. So if you could launch that, Paul, and see how we do with this poll.
Excellent. So it's all launched. So everyone can vote. We'll give it a few moments for everyone to vote. Okay, so we have just closed the poll. So we have had 60% yes and 40% said no.
Okay. So interesting that when we look at the juxtaposition here, we're certainly teaching and developing. The question here is one more specific about standalone, whether they're integrated or embedded in certain classes or certain modules, or are they standalone? And this doesn't surprise me. I think that many institutions look at this as part of what they might be doing in their classes, and that they extract from their classes some type of tool that assesses or evaluates within a particular module the effectiveness of or what they're doing with regards to soft skills. So we're going to keep those polls, but you know, again, these results don't surprise me, but it is interesting to take a look at what those responses might be. Now, if we move into, I'm sorry, if we move into the next slide is on the methods for developing soft skills. And as I've mentioned, institutions for a number of years really have taken it upon themselves to develop these soft skills within their institutions, and using a lot of different ways to do that. Some very creative, innovative ways, and we're seeing some real changes happening right now as well. So it's interesting to just look at some of these and what types of things institutions are doing. The notion of experiential learning, that's sort of a buzzword today, but that also includes simulation exercises, whether done by an individual or teams. There's a lot of partnership with companies, whether through internships or business experiences, co-ops, in which we're expecting students to practice and hone their soft skills. And of course, we evaluate those experiences, both if it's a simulation or in some type of internship. And usually those surveys or questionnaires that we're getting from those activities give us an idea of how students might be doing. There's certainly schools which use some type of transversal projects from one school to the next. So if a school has a business school or maybe a law school, bringing students from different disciplines together is also another way that schools are using this, requiring students to participate in government or activities within the organization. Some schools sort of give a lot of leeway to students So they are developing leadership or teamwork skills or critical thinking skills. Of course, several other activities. This is just a short list of things that schools are doing to help develop soft skills. With that, I'd like to bring back my expert here, and that's Laure, to help explain to us, if you could, how EMLV is developing and enhancing soft skills and assessing those soft skills at your institution. So if you open your microphone, you are. Go ahead, Laure.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Paul. So I'm happy to notice that we all share the same analysis about the importance of soft skills in the workplace. Regarding EMLV, that's the reason why we have decided 5 years ago to address this challenge and to create and implement a soft skill training program. I should say a massive soft skill training program. In order, of course, to help our students to develop these required skills for the 21st century. The first point I wish to emphasize is quite the importance of that program in the EMLV. Soft skills courses have become an integral part of our courses, and they are compulsory, they are graded, and one student they represent now more than 350 hours throughout the 5-year study of our students, specific dedicated soft skills courses, so 350 hours, which is quite interesting. You can teach them some interesting stuff within that duration. And regarding teaching content, actually, we have focused on soft skills our student will need in this sort of a digitized world, or some say VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex. And so it helped us, of course, reading all these international studies, reading the research work, listening to the companies needs. We created that program. And so I can give you some example of our modules. For instance, we have soft skill modules about learning to learn. How can we learn about new subjects? We have modules about critical thinking. It's quite a new one. It has only 2 years. So how can we develop our critical way of thinking? Of course, more classical efficiency and time management, public speaking and eloquence, which is quite traditional. One which is quite important is about self-awareness. How can we understand our personality and our behavior style? And we have several modules throughout the 5 years, of course, because it's a huge theme. I think a whole life won't be enough to explore that understanding of ourselves. And we have a module about managing emotions, managing relations with others, emotional intelligence, which is quite important at the workplace, of course, cooperation and teamwork, which is crucial, and agility, collective intelligence, which is a new module we created that year, collective intelligence, creativity and innovation, agility, of course, leadership, which is more traditional, I should say, and then citizenship participation, because we thought that really being aware of the sustainability issues, we consider that it is quite a soft skill, a crucial soft skills too. So we have included that, not sustainable development as a course, but as an attitude and a project, team projects. And each of these skills is covered by one or several modules throughout the 5-year study of our business school students. And currently we have about, I should say, 15 different modules, and each module has various duration from 15 hours to 35 hours. It all depends. So throughout the 5 years. So that's the first point. I think that that's quite interesting for us, because we have plenty of time to dedicate to the soft skills training of our students. And the second point, which I think is quite interesting and a bit unique maybe at the EMLV, is that this soft skills training program is quite embedded in the interdisciplinary culture of Paul Léonard de Vinci in this sort of what we call in France transversal approach. because we have actually the Pôle Leonardo da Vinci, we have 3 schools under the same governance from the start of the Pôle Leonardo da Vinci. And so we are used to mixing activities, competencies, programs between the business school, the engineering school, and the web and multimedia school. And so when we decided to create this soft skills department, it was actually obvious for us to mix during the soft skill courses the managers, the engineers, and the designer, the web designers. And so for each of our soft skills modules, we get all the students from the same cohort of the 3 schools. For instance, all the first year students coming from the business school, the engineering school, and the multimedia school, which means 1,200 students for instance, for 1 week. And we divide them in group of 25 students coming from the 3 schools, and then in team, interdisciplinary team, which is very important. Teamwork on whatever topic, whatever soft skills topic, is really crucial for us, because we really want our manager students, our business school students, to be able to work in this interdisciplinary approach with their colleagues, engineers, and web designers. That's very important, and they understand people who have different frameworks, different approaches, different competencies, and it helps, I think, our students to develop well, their empathy, which is a great soft skill, of course, their ability to work in this sort of hybrid culture, which is quite the way that companies work now. So it's a way to prepare our students to the future of the jobs.
Great. Now, you brought up this question of interdisciplinarity and working interdisciplinary. Is that an easy task to manage? Because I actually have a slide here of when we were in lockdown, you had people who had to kind of move online and do all of this online. We traditionally think of soft skills as being something you have to be face-to-face with people, but how were you able to manage some of this in this interdisciplinary activities, maybe even in the challenge of a lockdown?
Well, it is not so easy, of course. Whatever we are in proper classes or online classes, of course, are the same, because in theory, I think that everybody values, interdisciplinary approach. But in reality, it's not so easy to work with people who differ from us. So we have to train, I think. That's not so easy. So in soft skills modules, whatever here in the Pôle Leonardo da Vinci or on our online courses, we pay a lot of attention to what happens in an interdisciplinary team. So a team of 6 students with 2 of to a business school, 2 coming from the engineering school, and 2 coming from the web. Are they able to share their values, to express themselves about behavioral preferences regarding teamwork, for instance? Are they able to create common rules for their teamwork, and common rule they commit to to follow on together? Are they able to give them, some feedback when they are confronting some problems, some feedback constructive? So we have to help them, and of course that's the mission of our soft skills trainers and coaches and teachers. But so I think that's it's a crucial soft skill for me, this ability to work with people who are different from us, different cultures, different maybe countries, and different type of training programs, different paradigms.
I think everybody in the audience would certainly agree under the current situation that learning how to work with a diverse environment is critical for your success as a person, both personally and professionally. Thanks for sharing with us. That's a very interesting approach to developing soft skills. now I'd like to kind of take it from the student perspective. I have Christina here who recently finished a master's program. She's a very energetic person, works full-time, and is now completing a PhD program and a doctoral program at Vanderbilt. So I have a great admiration for my colleagues. So I'd like to ask Christina, if you would just share with us as a student in a program, how does Vanderbilt really address the soft skills in your academic program?
Great, Paul. You know, and I was wondering about this because I moved directly from my master's to my doctoral program, and I got to say I'm very impressed. We have a cohort that goes through the program together. There are about 16 to 20 people in each class that I take. And it seems like right now, I'll just give you an example. One of my courses is strategy and analytics. And there are about 20 people in this class. We have 3 major assignments that are team-based projects. They call it problem-based learning. So we're assigned a group of 4 people, and we have 3 or 4 weeks to, one assignment was we have to write a grant proposal. There's a $5 million grant on the line, and my team has to choose an organization, gather 3 years of financial records, study their strategy, and then propose a solution that we want to implement with the $5 million and show how it will be sustainable. Well, I'm working with 4 people I've never met before. We have to have time management skills because we have to deliver a presentation in 3 weeks. We have to negotiate to choose which organization we're going to focus on. We have to delegate the tasks, who's going to be responsible for what, synthesize it, and then give a 15-minute presentation to the entire class. When we give the presentations, our peers that we work with are rating us, and they're voting for the winning proposal. And then we have to give feedback to our teammates on what areas they were strong in, where they could improve. So it really reminded me, and I'm a working professional, as are all of my peers in the class. This is what we do, and some of our peers are across the country, and we have to schedule video conferences, you know, in off hours to meet with them. And these are the type of workplace skills that we're learning in our program. You know, we have the lessons on one side, and then we have the application and this problem-based learning to teach the soft skills on the other.
So it's interesting. I'm sure your team is going to win the #1 prize for the best project. But you know, we've talked about this before, Christina, and how and because you bring that into our discussions. You talk about what's happening within your program. You share that with your colleagues. You integrate that into some of what we're doing, which I think is very interesting to take it, you know, one step beyond just, you know, experiencing it as a student. You take that and you share it with your colleagues. And I'm sure that students, when they're learning these soft skills, is what Laura's doing, they're also exploiting that in their environment, sharing with others. So I think that there's a real dynamic. It's different than learning how to do finance. I don't think I go home and, you know, share with my spouse, oh, I just learned this new formula. But there's something about a soft skill that you can share. And I think that that's very interesting. And that's one thing I do remark with what happens within our organization and when you share those experiences. And I'm sure that happens for anyone in an environment where you're learning those soft skills and can really pass them along. So I'd like to move on to the next part, which is really looking at how soft skills are assessed. And this is a big challenge because there are reasons why we're assessing soft skills. And some of these reasons are for accreditation purposes. Our accreditors like AMBA really look at soft skills and hard skills. And for learning outcomes purposes, there is a requirement, sort of compliance that we have to provide. AMBA is not the only accreditor that does that. Virtually all accreditors have sort of a balance between hard and soft skills that they're requiring. In terms of employer expectation, career-ready graduates, there's the notion of ensuring, as Law has mentioned several times, as Olin mentioned, making sure that we create career-ready graduates, and that's an employer expectation. There's an organization that's a large one in North America called the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they have a set of competencies, 8 competencies that are aligned with a lot of soft skills, and this demonstrates this alignment. And also students needing some type of actionable feedback of what they can do to mitigate any weaknesses they might have in soft skills, and to promote their strengths in soft skills. Students really do like to, when they're in the job market looking for a job, really promote themselves in terms of what they've been able to develop and what they're good at in terms of soft skills. And employers will certainly ask that. Now, of course, assessing soft skills is a very difficult task, and I'm sure Law will agree with you, and managing assessment of soft skills both on the professional and an academic environment, for several reasons. They're difficult to define, they're hard to identify. We really don't have a standard categorization. People's interpretation of ethics or critical thinking can vary significantly across the same country or regions, but across the world even more. The term soft skill really is misleading because it's not soft, it's really quite hard to develop and maintain. But we're using other terms like transversal skills or traveling skills. You bring them with you from one place to another and you develop them as you go. The problem with subjectivity and bias, because we're evaluating behaviors, and in the evaluation of behavior, there's always that implicit problem of bias and subjectivity, as well as assessments being used for different objectives. One may be accreditation, the other being student feedback. Now, I have a third poll, and I'm going to ask Paul to bring this poll up, which is, how are your institutions assessing soft skills? Because it's an important component. So my question here is, does your institution, to begin with, assess individual soft skills that are expected during a program of study? So I have 4 choices here: separate assessments for soft skills, so teamwork, leadership, critical thinking, or assess as part of other learning modules. So if you have a course in marketing, you're assessing maybe communication skills in a presentation they're doing, a combination of both, separate assessments for soft skills or integrated into learning modules, or that you're not currently really assessing soft skills. This is a whole nother world of assessment. There's one in developing, assessing is another. So Paul, if you could launch that and see how our audience responds to that question.
Yep, definitely, Paul. So the poll has been launched. We'll give it a few moments for everyone to answer. Okay, so we have 25% say separate assessments for soft skills, 23% say assess as part of other learning modules, 33% say a combination of both, and 20% we do not currently assess soft skills.
So very interesting. See, I didn't know what to expect here. There's a real spread here between separate assessments, using this as part of learning modules, a combination of both. So that just speaks to the challenge of each individual institution is trying to find the best way that they can come up with for assessing soft skills. And I'm sure that's the challenge that that we all face, is putting into place a solid assessment process within the organization. Now, obviously, we're here at an AMBA presentation, and many of you who are AMBA accredited schools or aspirant schools looking towards accreditation, you know that Peregrine works very closely with AMBA to make sure that what we do in terms of solutions for schools really are in alignment with. We do a lot of assessments with hard skills. We do modules, learning modules, as well as other activities that provide solutions. So we work very closely with institutions, with accreditors, sorry, to ensure that what we're doing is in alignment with schools, with accreditors and what their requirements are. Here at AMBA, if you're familiar with that famous Principle 6, you'll notice that competencies, graduate attributes, and learning outcomes really focus on soft skills. They focus on hard skills, on other principles, but here in Principle 6, you see leadership, teamwork, decision-making, ethics. This is where AMBA is looking at that notion of making sure that schools are not only helping to develop proficient graduates, workplace, career-ready graduates with these soft skills, and the ability to manage the learning outcomes, which means assessing, because the learning outcomes comes with an assessment of that. So that's the challenge for institutions, is putting them in place, but also creating an assessment process for meeting and complying with this particular principle. Now, I'd like to bring my friend Laura back in just for a couple of minutes, Laura, to address, because we're moving very far ahead on our time, but I'm sure we'll have some time for questions at the end. Laura, you're responsible, obviously, for the soft skills at EMLV, but you also have a bunch of accreditors that you have to be responsible for providing your accreditation manager with information about how you're doing. So can you just say a few words on the process that you use for assessing soft skills and feeding that back to the organizations so that they can meet accreditation requirements? And here's some of the organizations that are looking at your organization and that you've been accredited by.
Well, I think all these organizations, all these institutions, well, they help me in my professional mission of soft skills training in two different ways, I should say. The first one is helping us maybe to think about the different topics we could create, we could develop. So which kind of soft skills do we have to focus on? So your previous slide, you show some soft skills, leadership, critical thinking, global citizenship. So that was quite interesting. And I think that's really a huge help to help us, the schools, to think about the different soft skills we are training our students to. And for instance, I can give you, I have two examples I am personally involved in. The first one is about sustainable development and CSR. And we, at the beginning, when we developed the soft skill program, we launched a few topics for teamworks, students' teamworks on these issues. And we really were encouraged by the accreditation institution to develop it really on a larger dimension. So that's what we did. So they helped us, to give some sort of boost. I don't know the English word to that test we had made previously. So sustainable global citizenship and corporate social responsibility. And my second example is about critical thinking. 2 years ago, the accreditation institutions asked us to develop, and they said, well, something is lacking in your soft skills program. It's critical thinking. So, well, that was quite a challenge, because not so easy to teach critical thinking. It's I did my PhD, so yeah, I had the feeling that it's really a very long-term process. But I met some researchers specialized in neurosciences and cognitive psychology, and we had a discussion and we built together that program. It is a short introduction to critical thinking. So that's thanks to the feedback of the accreditation process. So that was very interesting. And I think that the second help is about, of course, the assessment process. You spoke about it previously. It's very difficult to assess soft skills. You have attitudes, behaviors, personality traits, and not only knowledges. And so quiz can be useful, but of course, you have to use many different assessment tools and methods, and flipped classroom and plays role, of course, and team project and peer reviews. So we have to test plenty of different tools and to question each year our evaluation processes and methods, and to be able to build something new. So I think that rigorous approach to evaluation, to assessment, is another help coming from this accreditation process. Well, that's mine.
So they're asking you to do this, so you have to be cognizant of it and put it into place, not just developing it and the challenge of assessing it. Which brings me to one of the things that we as an organization, as a globally recognized leader in developing leaders and providing higher education assessments and competency-based learning modules. Peregrine has not, simply just watched all of this happen from the sidelines. With the advent of this need, Peregrine has responded by helping to develop a solution for institutions. And I'd like to bring Olin back in to help provide our audience with the genesis of this newest solution for higher education institutions called Value Skills. Olin?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. A couple of years ago, Laurel and I, and you, Paul, you recall we were visiting with a group in Paris, and we got to talking about soft skill development. The group had a couple of the schools used our knowledge-based assessment to assess the technical skills of the business program. And we had kind of a brainstorming session because, as I understand it, there's some requirements from the French system of being able to document and assess some of these key soft skills in the various disciplines outside of business. It was diversity there. Had a delightful conversation about that, and a lot of that conversation centered around the challenge of trying to do a self-assessment. The opinion being it's very difficult. You can ace a test in communications, but be a lousy communicator because really soft skills is best measured from the perspective of somebody else about you. And so we were thinking about that. And then later that same year, I happened to be in India visiting one of our schools, and we got to talking about internships. And he showed me, the director there showed me this report that they had the internship supervisor complete on the student. And it was kind of a cumbersome process and a cumbersome report. So he kind of wanted some thoughts from me on how to maybe improve that process. And we got talking about 360 assessments. And here at Peregrine, we've been doing a 360 assessment for over 10 years with our trainings that we do with Peregrine Leadership, where the participants come in, they take a 360 at the start of the program, and then they also take another one about 8 months later at the end of the program. And the 360 is meant to give the participants an action plan so that they got something tangible to work on in the construct of our training session. And then as well as at the end of this, we can actually do a pre-test, post-test evaluation, which helps us to see the effectiveness of our training programs. So kind of putting all three of these together, these conversations and our process, we developed was kind of the genesis behind Value Skills, coming up with an online 360 process that schools could use to assess soft skills, not only help the students, but also from a programmatic standpoint, to see what, if any, gaps might exist and how that translate over time.
Great. So, I mean, obviously I'm involved in watching this having taken place, but I'd like to bring Christina in because Christina has been a very important person in the development of this service. And if you could just help the audience understand a little bit how a Value Skills works, so that people who are interested, I'll be giving some more information after. If you could just help the audience understand how this works.
Sure. A real brief overview is that the Value Skills assessment process begins with the administrator, and they select from a menu of workplace skills which items they want to assess in their students or employees, whichever group that is participating. We have about 250 different transversal skills that are available, and each one has a rubric that dictates specific example behaviors and statements. So that what Olin might think is a good listener and what I think might be a good listener, maybe they're different, but this gives exact examples of what the person's behaviors are like. So the administrator will set which dozen skills they want to evaluate. They'll enter some participants, which might be your students, and then invite the students via email to go in and select a team of evaluators. And as Olin said, this is best measured from an exterior perspective. So we encourage them to have, 6 to 12 at least people that might be at a higher level. Maybe there are advisors or mentors, professors. They could be supervisors from an internship. They could be fellow students, or maybe if they're working professionals, people that they work with, to give them candid feedback on each of these skills. So the evaluator logs in, they see the participant's picture and go through and rate on the scale of 1 to 5 with the specific behaviors, their recollection of that participant, and then they write in any comments. All their feedback is anonymous. And at the end of the day, well, at the end of the assessment period, the student gets a participant report which shows their strengths and weaknesses. It compares them, benchmarks them against the group, and then it also provides them with an action plan for developing on some of those weaknesses, giving them a timeline, suggested actions, someone to hold them accountable. They enter all that information. And then the administrator can also log in and get an overall group report that shows where their group is strong and where they might need some more development, and who within their group really shines and who could use some additional mentoring. So it can be useful for demonstrating the achievement of learning outcomes and also continuing the improvement of your program.
So it's interesting because we've talked about the multifaceted aspect of this assessment tool. As you mentioned, the reports provide accreditation managers or faculty with some indicators of how they're doing with their with the types of assessment development that they're taking place at the institution. But it also provides the person being assessed with knowledge of where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. And as you mentioned, there's a report that provides sort of a guideline of how to do better. So it's interesting to look at this type of solution for schools and the ability to use it in a number of different places and for the purpose of for accreditation or individual student activities, but of course being able to be transversal. So it's not just specifically for a business school. It could be used certainly for an engineering or in Laura's case, you know, three different schools if you're using this transversal. So there's an opportunity, I think, to see this as a broad assessment tool for workplace soft skills. So that just, I don't know if anyone else in my panel would like to add anything before we move to questions. We're heading towards the end of our hour, so it does leave us a few more minutes for questions. So I'm not sure, Paul, if you want to come back on board and see if there are any questions that came up during our presentation.
Hi, Paul. So we've had a few questions come in. So the first one is, should business schools have full soft skill programs, e.g. emotional intelligence 1.0, or should this be implemented in every program, module, or course?
That's a good one, because I think I'm going to ask Laura to respond to that, because I think you're doing it a couple of ways. It seems to me you do some of it embedded and some separate, if I understand the question.
Yes, exactly. So I understand that question because, you know, I had it a few years ago. I think, well, we do both. Actually, we have specific dedicated soft skill courses. I present all these courses, all these soft skills modules in my answers a few minutes ago, but it's not enough. I think that soft skills and hard skills have to be really closely embedded. No separation. So you have to understand what is emotional intelligence. So you have to get a proper course, I think, about emotional intelligence to understand, because they are concepts, of course. They are, you know, attitude. They are, you're going to have place role. Well, it's a deep and fascinating subject, and you have to practice it within the framework of your technical courses, for instance. So we do both. For instance, in EMLV and in engineering school, we have specific teamwork projects. I mean, business projects or technical projects in the engineering school. And we have some sort of soft skill coaching of the teamwork. So they are working on business topics, business issues, or the engineers are working on technical and scientific issues. But a soft skill coach is, you know, helping them to understand what's happening. How are they managing their emotions? How are they dealing, you know, with the emotions within the group, and how can they help, you know, the global team performance on the technical issue? So I think both, you know, the mix of the both is really, well, a good mix, I think.
I think that's a great response, because you're right, hard and soft skills. You can't do your soft skills unless you're integrating some of those soft skills. Paul, do you have another question or two that came up?
Yes, I do. 1 second. Would a leadership course be considered a soft skill module?
I'm going to turn that over to Olin because he's someone who is the leadership guru. So what do you think, Olin?
Well, the old classic answer, it depends. What are you teaching in the leadership program? You know, there's two ways to teach leadership. Usually we teach it kind of a blend of both. Obviously, you need to teach some leadership theory, some, you know, understanding there. What does it mean to be a leader? Theory X, theory Y, whatever those kind of dimensions of leadership. But more important than that is the application of leadership in today's workplace. That's a soft skill. How you lead by example, how you present information, how you motivate and inspire performance, how you communicate a vision. Those are dimensions that I would categorize as soft skills. So depends on your course, how it's really structured, but oftentimes a leadership course should be that blend between the theory and the application, and I would argue the emphasis on the application.
Great, thanks. Anything else before we?
Yeah, so we've got time for one more. So in terms of developing soft skills, experiential learning is vital for business schools. What are the challenges associated with this in terms of COVID-19, and what would be your advice for business school leaders?
I'm not sure I quite get the whole the gist of the question. Unless someone else can address that, I'm not sure. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. In terms of developing soft skills, experiential learning is vital for business schools. What are the challenges associated with this in terms of COVID-19, and what would be your advice to business school leaders?
So, experiential learning, yes, under the COVID world. So maybe it's this is one thing that I had a slide up there with a bunch of people in Laura's program on, I think it was maybe a Zoom or a Teams meeting. So Laura, what did you do when you were expecting, sort of experiential learning to be taking place, but you're having to convert this to an online environment?
Well, it was quite a challenge, I must admit, maybe a little nightmare, because I had a training week that was planned for, well, 1 year. Well, I had 3 actually, one on the 20th of March, 30th of March, and mid-April. And so we learned in France, we had to confinement. I don't know the
lockdown.
Yes, the lockdown at the on Monday. I think that was the 16th of March. So I had 1 week to try to convert one normal soft skill week for 1,200 students and 45 coaches into 100% online courses. And guess what? The topic was about public speaking and eloquence. So the ideal topic, for 100%. Well, that was a bit hard, I must admit, but at the end of the day, we did it, and I think, well, the students were quite happy not to be on their own at home in this sort of, anxious times. And but it requires a great commitment. It's, of course, from the coaches, from the teachers. So we had to reconceive, a totally new pedagogical design adapted to this 100% online framework. You can't. I couldn't use the same synopsis.
Yeah. So it's called innovation and adaptability, and I think a lot of us had to do it. But I mean, we are going to be facing the next academic year with a lot more of our online learning, which means we still have to do this soft skills activities online, and that means that I think we're all looking for best practices, and maybe AMBA can help continue bringing us together with some future webinars to help bring together people of how they're being creative and innovative in this process. So I'd just like to thank everybody on the panel for participating. If you'd like to learn more about our solution, Peregrine's solution to helping develop and assess soft skills within a higher education institution, this can be adapted, I said, to both undergraduate, postgraduate, and even faculty and staff within the institution. We offer what's called a tutorial. It's a great way to get your hands really deep into the process of how this solution works. You can drop me an email at peregrineglobal.com or our info line. There's my telephone number. I'm here in France, or if you're in the North America region, you certainly can call the US. We have lots of opportunities to engage with you. I think this presentation will be made available to you as well. And I will be certainly following up to say thank you for participating. We look forward to seeing you. Hopefully the day that we'll be back face to face in the not too distant future, we're hoping, because those kinds of connections really allow us to understand a little bit more about the institutions that are looking for solutions, our AMBA family of institutions. And again, we thank you for joining our presentation. I want to thank Law, I want to thank Olin, Laurel, and Christina for helping with this presentation today, and especially to Paul and AMBA for inviting us in to provide this information for our audience today. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul, and everyone else on the panel. Just before we go, I'd just like to let everyone know that in the chat box, I've sent some links so you can register for the next sessions. Our next session is taking place tomorrow at 9:30 to 10:30 BST, and that's with Himanshu Rai from Indian Institute of Management Indore, and he'll be presenting on redefining social impact. So if you'd like to join that session or any other sessions we have for this week or the following weeks, please head over to the website and you'll be able to register. Just before we go, just like to thank you all again for taking part, and everyone who joined this session. Obviously, all the questions which were unanswered are passed forward to Paul and the team, and they'll get in touch. And we look forward to seeing you at another session shortly.
I'll certainly be joining. Looking forward to that, Paul.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.